guest speaker this evening is small businessman John Anthony. John is a staunch opponent of the UN's Agenda 21. I'll be speaking tonight about the history of Agenda 21 and what we can do to protect ourselves from it. John is a former teacher in the Philadelphia school system. He is deeply concerned about the impact of government on businesses, personal rights, and our successful American way of life. To address this, he founded the organization Sustainable Freedom Lab. John develops and presents programs, DVDs, and workshops to inform citizens of the dangers of current policies and provide action plans to expand our freedoms. At this time, I'd like to welcome Mr. John Anthony.
All right. Well, while you're waking the slide up, let me just thank you very much for coming out tonight. And I'll talk real fast so I can get done before the snow sets in. There's a lot to cover this evening about Agenda 21 and also sustainable development and how it gets into your community. But I want to give you a little caveat. Agenda 21 is a gargantuous concept. We're going to talk about it. We're going to... are you on here?
The Rockville Center.
It was? No, the picture. We're trying to get the picture up there.
Go ahead, John. I'll let you know.
So I'm going to give you a lot of information about what this animal called Agenda 21 is, where it came from, how it works, and why. But I'm not really sharing this with you because I think it's a good idea to go out and tell the world about Agenda 21. I don't think it is a particularly good idea. The impact of it is in our communities now. You can see it. You can see it in a thing called regionalism, sustainable development. Anybody heard of the Affordable Care Act? That's all part of this program. It's actually Chapter 36 in the Agenda 21 book, which I'll show you in just a moment. Common Core actually is in full compliance with this whole Agenda 21 animal. So what is this crazy thing? So I'm going to explain it to you, where it came from, how it works, and why. But what we have to be careful of is that if you get off, I'm going to make sure I'm not messing up over here somewhere. If you get off in a long-winded conversation about what Agenda 21 is and get into the weeds about explaining how it works and why the Affordable Care Act is related to it, you're just going to destroy your own credibility. You're going to get caught in a long-winded conversation that you don't really need to have anyway. So this is for your knowledge. So what I'm going to do, that's it, Christopher. Yeah, it is. It's almost unbelievable, but I'm going to show you how it's very, very real. But what we do want to do is look at the impact, and that's what we're going to spend the bulk of this presentation on. We're going to look at how it's in your community today, how it gets there, and also take a look at what you can do about it. So I call this presentation False Choice, how sustainable development and regionalism are transforming your community. We're going to talk just a little bit about property rights, because sustainable development has everything in the world to do with property. But most of us in this world, in America, have taken property so for granted that we forget what it means and what the value of it is. If I own a piece of property, that adds to my net worth. That begins to build my value. Most Americans actually, that's where they get their money from. They save money, they buy a home, they pay off the mortgage, and they build a net equity in there. If that net equity reduces, then my net worth begins to reduce. 70% of Americans cash in all or part of their house to start their businesses. They borrow against it. Well, what if I had a house that was worth $400,000 or $300,000 or $100,000, but all of a sudden, because of sustainable development programs or regionalist edicts, the value dropped in half. Then I couldn't borrow as much money to start my business. So businesses, our very way of life, are very much contingent upon the value of our property and our ability to be able to trade and exchange that. In fact, property was so valuable that Thomas Jefferson said the small landowners are the most precious part of the state. But you're going to find out that not everybody recognizes that value in property that we understand is there. This is, over here we have Mike and Chantel Sackett in Priest Lake, Idaho. They went to build a small home for themselves. They bought a piece of property, went to build a home, and all of a sudden the EPA came in and said, well, you can't build that there because there's a wetland. Now, there wasn't a wetland anywhere near there, but that didn't matter. They were charged $75,000 a day in fines, and they were told they couldn't even go to court to protect themselves. Well, they did go to court, and it cost them 4 years of their lives just to try to get their home back and the ability to build their home on the land that they want. 4 years later, they didn't really get the right to build it. All they got was the right to sue. So these people are still in court trying to get the property to build their land. This is supposedly a land where we own our own property. Down at the bottom of the page, you see Big Meadows Grazing. They entered into a conservation easement with the federal government. The net result of that was the value of their land has been decreased, and now the only people they can sell the land back to and get their full value is going to be the federal government. So one day that land will not be in private hands any longer. And over here we have a picture of Jenny Granado. Jenny Granado lives out in Montgomery County, Ohio, and the officials in Montgomery County formed a region, and they decided, we want to put a bicycle path in front of your house. She said, well, I want a bicycle path there. You guys can't do that. They said, well, we're going to put a road there, and you see the roadway. They had started down there. And about 6 weeks later, all of a sudden, that was laid down there. That's a bicycle path, 7 feet from the front of her doorway. They told her, we'll give you a check for $23,875 to pay for this. They're doing it in the public good. The county engineer said, well, we know that Mrs. Garano is giving us a hard time, but people do that all the time. We're doing it for the public good. Well, when people start talking about the public good, we need to be really, really careful with that. We all care about the public. We care about the public good. Of course we do. But there's a fine line between caring about the public good and surrendering all of our rights and individual property. And now suddenly that seesaw is beginning to tilt away from us. There's a history of this thing called sustainable development, because each of the examples that I just showed you up there were examples of people who lost their property rights through this thing called sustainable development or regionalism. So we're going to back up and look at where this thing came from. 1976, in Vancouver, there was a meeting of some people up there. They were UN folks. A few Americans were there also, representing the United States. And at that point, they decided what the relationship would be between man and property. And they came out with a preamble in this document, this plan of action. And I want to read this to you. I'm not going to read anything else like this, but I do want to read this to you this evening. It's so important. Land cannot be controlled by individuals and subject to the inefficiencies of the market. Private land is a principal means of accumulation of wealth, and it contributes to social injustice. Think what I just said. Private property contributes to social injustice. If unchecked, you're allowed to have your private property any old way you want, it may become a major obstacle in the planning and implementation of development schemes. Okay? Social justice can only be achieved if land is used in the interests of society as a whole. Now this is pure, for those historians, Marxism. This is pure Marxism. But up there in Vancouver, Canada, by the United States, the United Nations, we can understand that, because a lot of these people were socialists and Marxists, so that kind of makes sense. And this whole notion that you can't own private property because it's unfair, it's socially unjust, never would have gone anywhere except that it was signed onto by the United States, for the United States, by William K. Riley, who later became the head of the EPA under George H.W. Bush. It sat there for a while. That was 1976. And 11 years later, a report came out called Our Common Future. And in Our Common Future, this is what it looks like, by the way. In Our Common Future, this report outlined what it would take to create a world that would be sustainable. As that action report back in 1976 created the relationship between man and private property, this book created the relationship between wealth and the environment. So in here, they dubbed in Chapter 2 this concept called sustainable development. It's Chapter 2 of Our Common Future. And they defined it. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Sound good? Sounds good, yeah. I'm all for that. I want to take care of myself today and take care of my kids and my grandkids tomorrow. That makes a whole bunch of sense. Except there's a little problem when you want to do this on a global scale. How are we going to take care of future needs when we don't even know what those future needs are? So they came up with an answer for that. It's all here in Chapter 2. It says what we really have to do is take care of society, the economy, and the environment. If we can manage all of those, well, how do you do that? Well, it has a formula in here. And the way it works is this. The poor are damaging the planet because they don't have any money. So therefore, if they need to heat their home, they chop down a tree and they burn the wood and they damage resources. So they're hurting the planet because they have no money. The rich are hurting the planet because they have too much money. They go out and they buy stuff, computers and cars and iBooks and all kinds of things. That wastes resources and that's deplenishing the earth, so we have to do something about that. So if you're poor, you're wrecking the earth. If you're rich, you're wrecking the earth, but for different reasons. So the obvious answer to the folks who ran the UN was, what? We take the money from the one group, we give it to the other group. That's called wealth redistribution. And that's all this book is about. This book is about redistribution of wealth. Now, when I first heard the term sustainable development, to me, what did it mean? I want to sustain things. I think that's a good thing to do. Save money, have a nice home, have a good planet for my kids, good stuff. Development, what's wrong with that? But that's not what this means. That's not what this means. If sustainable development was just about, recycling the garbage can every Friday afternoon, that wouldn't be a problem. But this is about redistributing wealth in order to protect the planet and to be sure that too many people don't accumulate property that's unfair to the folks that can't do it and interferes with development schemes. Well, this idea, crazy as it is, didn't go anywhere at first. So a couple of years later, United Nations in New York contacted this fellow, Jeb Brueggemann, who was an organizer, a kind of a community organizer back there in the 80s. And they said, look, you're really good at working with local governments and getting them to act. What we want to do is we don't want to let this thing die. We want this to become reality globally. So would you help us by setting up some kind of an organization that will set up meetings in all these different communities around the country and make this thing globally active? And he said, sure. So we started a group called ICLEI. Raise your hand if you heard the word ICLEI. About half the people here? Okay, ICLEI. The Environmental Council on Local Environmental Issues, the International Council, was formed for the specific reason of turning this into reality. It doesn't have any other job. It's not like they go home in the afternoon and they change and they put on another suit and they go to their night job. No. The only thing they have to do in the world is to see that this version of sustainable development, which is really about wealth, what? Wealth redistribution. You gotta like it. Wealth redistribution. That's what this version of sustainable development is. But that's their job. Well, he got together with other non-governmental organizations, because that's what ICLEI is. It's a non-governmental organization. It's not a government, but it has massive amounts of clout. Like the Sierra Club, which you've probably heard of, Nature Conservancy, World Resources Institute. It's not that some of these groups don't do some good stuff. They do. They protect planets, they protect the environment. They do some really good stuff. But they also do some really heavy-handed stuff, and that's what we're focusing on. So what they did is they took the ideas from here, and they said, we need to create some kind of an agenda, and they did. They created an agenda for the 21st century, and that's what Agenda 21 is. It's this book. It's simply a plan to operationalize the ideas that were outlined in this report over here back in '87. That's what this is. In here, you'll find good stuff. If you read it, it sounds good. We want to protect the planet. We want to protect the streams, protect the little birds and the animals and the oceans. It all makes perfect sense. The mountains. It also says something about we want to be sure that everybody has a health insurance policy. There's a whole chapter devoted to that. We want to be sure that everybody has a public education that's managed on a higher level by the state government. To the UN, we're all just another state. It's managed by the state government. That's all in here too. You find we have things like this starting to pop up all across the United States. So at surface value, this isn't so bad. What's wrong with education? What's wrong with health care? What's wrong with helping the planet and keeping the streams clean? This is all kind of good stuff. So if you tell somebody who swears by this, Agenda 21, they'll say, well, that's not so bad. But ask yourself one question. How do I make it work? If I don't control the stream and the water, if I don't control the healthcare system, if I don't control the educational system, then how can I be sure it's going to work the way we want it to work? The answer is, you can't. In a free market society, you could never begin to do this. You could educate, but you could never actually make it happen. So that would have to bridge that gap between a suggestion and an order to become effective. In 1992 in Rio de Janeiro, this book was rolled out at the Sustainable Development Earth Summit. At the Earth Summit, 18,000 people showed up, and there were several treaties. There were like 2 treaties and 2 other agreements that were signed back there in 1992. One of those agreements was a thing called the UN Global Diversity Assessment. And in that diversity assessment, it took the ideas from here and here, and it said, well, okay, we need to operationalize it now. We need to make that all work. So you can't work the whole planet with a skinny little book like this, so they came up with this one.
Oh, Jesus.
And this book, I don't know, 1,200 pages, 1,140 pages, this book tells you, among other things, what it is that you cannot have. Remember, it's sustainable? Well, you gotta have stuff that's non-sustainable. So what is it that we can't have so we can have a sustainable planet? So we'll run through it real fast, just a couple of them. You can't have macadams, roads, and highways. That's on page 730 in here. You can't have dams. You're going to start reading newspapers and find dams are being taken down across the United States. And they are. The Klamath Dams out in Northern California. Right here, I'm sorry, I'm thinking I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm in New York. I live in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, not far from where I live on the Lehigh River, there's 2 dams that they want to take down over there. Dams are not sustainable. So on page 755 it says they have to be taken down. Our legal system is not sustainable, page 763. It doesn't represent the rights of animals and critters and plants sufficiently. Private property is not sustainable. 182 in this book. Why not? Well, we already talked about that, didn't we, back in 1976? Because it's unfair, it's socially unjust for one guy to be able to have a piece of property that's worth a whole bunch and another guy can't afford to do that. Consumerism is unsustainable. Page 773, because you're buying stuff and you're wrecking the planet to make the things that you're purchasing. The family unit is unsustainable. According to this book, only about 1 billion people, the planet will only support about 1 billion people. Anybody know how many people are on the planet right now?
About 8.
7 billion. 6 out of every 7 of us are in real deep trouble if this guy ever gets his way. And of course the United States, if this becomes reality, would look like this. 50% of the United States would be absolutely uninhabited, and the majority of the rest of it will only be inhabited on a very limited basis under very strict control. This is a thing called the Wildlands Project. And over here, I'm assuming if this will work. There we go. All these red areas are areas that you could not inhabit. The yellow areas are buffer zones between them, and you would get to live in these little dark dot spots up here. The regulations that would govern all of this are called the Wildlands Project, where the United States would be rewilded. Wolves would be set free. Animals would be set free that are now beginning to become extinct. They'd be turned free. Man would have to then be moved into these urban areas, and that's called smart growth. So between smart growth and the Wildlands Project, between the two of them, we now have shrunk the available space for man to live on in the United States. So little by little, the ideas that were developed back in 1976, they're becoming a reality today. Now this, by the way, was voted on. This whole Wildlands Project and the Agenda 21 concept was voted on in the Senate, was brought to the Senate to be voted on, when Dr. Michael Kaufman brought this map down to the Senate floor, and he showed them this. And he said, this is what you guys are voting for. At that point, they withdrew the vote, and it was never voted on. So you think, well, we're safe, right? Holy mackerel, this didn't go through. Senate never approved any treaties. We're okay, right? Well, not exactly. Because a year later, to the day from the summit, Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, President Bill Clinton signed an executive order called the President's Council on Sustainable Development. And the sole purpose of this council was conceived to formulate the recommendations for the implementation of Agenda 21. That's the only reason that ever came into effect. The President's Council on Sustainable Development had one task, to make this a reality in the United States. So bingo. We didn't pass it through the Senate. It wasn't passed. It was voted on twice in the House, but it never made it. It was never voted on in the Senate, and yet it became the law of the land through executive order. Well, anybody know how executive orders become laws that govern your daily life? A thing called federal agencies, and they passed what?
Regulations.
Regulations, that's it, regulations. So what happened was, sorry, let me back up just one second. When I first saw this, I thought, you know what, maybe this stopped. This was 1992, right? We're talking 90 or 93, right? We're talking years ago. So maybe they just let this drop by the wayside. So I went on the United Nations website in 2012 and I checked it out. Same agency. The Commission is responsible for reviewing progress in the implementation of Agenda 21 and the Rio Declaration. So this did not go away. It's still there. That's 2012. The federal agencies, in order to know what to say that would be in compliance with this, sat together with the people that wrote this. Now that's huge, and that's important to understand. How did the federal agencies get in compliance with this book? Because they served on the same committees together as the authors, with the authors of this book. And they wrote the regulations that govern water, education, healthcare system. All those regulations were written by the various federal agencies hand in hand with the authors. Now, we know this because we can go to the Federal Register, and if we shrink it down here, 1998 Federal Register, this is the EPA's Sustainable Development Challenge Grant Program, and it says right in there, it's a step in implementing Agenda 21, the Global Plan of Action on Sustainable Development. Now, just to make sure you're not thinking, well, maybe it's another Agenda 21 or another Sustainable Development, it defines it. The one that was signed by the United States at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. This never went away. So it went from 1976, cockamamie idea how you can't own your own property because it's unjust, all of a sudden to this book in 1987, to a non-governmental organization that decided to implement it, that wrote up an action plan here, right into your backyard by virtue of an executive order in 1992. It's not just there. If you go to HUD, this is one of the other federal agencies. Now, this is a HUD document of a notice of funding available for grant money. And the very front page of this, you'll notice down here, the economy, society, the economy, and the environment, the same three pillars that we talked about in sustainable development over here, in the very founding definition of it. Well, let's take a look at how definitive this becomes. If we skip ahead in this application for grant money to page 57, here's what it says, 58. Mandatory outcomes from the creation of a regional plan for sustainable development. If you take the grant money from the federal government, you will have reduced social and economic disparities, decreased per capita vehicle miles traveled, you will have a decrease in housing and transportation costs, and there will be an increased proportion of low and very low income households. Do you get a choice about it? No. That word mandatory says you don't have a choice. If you took that grant money from HUD for that regional sustainable development program, you will do these things. Now, this was back in 2010. This is a 2010 notice of funding available. Today, they did away with that wording. Instead, they call it something different. They call it the livability principles. The HUD.EPA livability principles. If you go to the government's website, HUD.gov, you'll see them right there. Provide more transportation choices. Promote equitable, affordable housing. Enhance economic competitiveness. This is the same equity, economy, and society that you see in here. It hasn't changed one little bit. But now, it's mandatory. If you take a regional grant, you must have the livability principles in them. Livability principles, for those of you who have actually studied history, and I know in this group we actually have it, this is like central planning. That's all it is. This is old communist central planning. Now, it looks a little bit different in the 21st century because we have greater technology, we can do a lot with less money, we have advanced methods of building, so it can actually look rather nice, that little prison cell that you walk in that's 2 by 4. But they've got some of these out in Seattle. I was just talking to a friend of mine here a little while ago. 141 square foot apartment for over $820 a month. Now, can you visualize 141 square feet?
10 by 14.
Yeah, 10 by 4. Is that a bedroom? That's not even a really good sized bedroom. That's kind of a little bedroom. People are living in those and they're paying over $800 a month. That's what sustainable development that's where it can go. And that's what regionalism can foist on you, whether you want it or not.
And John, they're planning those in New York City too.
Yes. Yeah, they're going to be big there. They got 200 square feet. Those are the biggies. The path forward. What many people may not realize is that in January of 2012, the Environmental Protection Agency changed the way they make scientific decisions. Now, they make lots of scientific decisions, like, CO2 is a dangerous gas, and you need to be careful. They decide what a polluted river is and what a polluted river is not, what a wetland is and what a wetland is not. But they changed the way to do it now. Instead of basing it purely on science, now they base it on this little thing called sustainable development. The EPA's path forward realigns the EPA's entire research enterprise around the concept of sustainability. So it's no longer just science talking. It's this kind of nebulous, frangible, sustainable development concept. And just to be sure that there's no mistake about where this has its heritage, the EPA recognizes the definition of sustainability as outlined by the Brundtland Commission. This is called the Brundtland Report in 1997. So this is alive, it's well, and it's infested every single aspect of federal government today. Most people never heard of Agenda 21, and here's one reason why. This guy's name is J. Gary Lawrence. He was an advisor to that President's Council we talked about back then in 1992. And in a report to the UN, here's what he said. Participating in a UN-advocated planning process would very likely bring out many who would actively work to defeat any elected official undertaking local Agenda 21. Yeah, you think? Just maybe. So we had a better idea. We will call our process something else, such as comprehensive planning, growth management, or smart growth. And they have. That's why you don't hear the name Agenda 21. Instead, you hear livable communities, complete streets, healthy communities, social equity, open spaces, environmental justice. But no matter what you call it, they're turning this, which is now called urban sprawl, into this, which is high density, well, mixed use, well, that's not mixed use, but high density living for the purpose of protecting the planet and compacting us into those black dots that we saw in that picture of the United States. By 2012, the sustainable development movement was unstoppable. It had spread to virtually every single corner of the United States. Corporations want to be sustainable. They want to be green. They all want to be on the good side of this. It's embedded in our culture. It's embedded when you go to the movies. It's on the television set. It's in the entire entertainment industry. It's in the news media. You couldn't get away from it if you chose to. It's in our kids' school books when you open up the textbooks. The U.S. Conference of Mayors brought on National Governors Association. Anybody know where else the National Governors Association pops up? Just curious. Pop quiz here.
Common Core.
Common Core, yes. Common Core. That came from the National Governors Association, which, by the way, has almost nothing to do with the governors. All of these people have now supported and backed this whole idea of Agenda 21, or sustainable. It's only called sustainable development. Well, what I want to look at now, I try to zip through that pretty fast. What I want to look at now is, how does this get into your backyard? How does sustainability get into your hometown? It's not a political movement. Instead, it's a plan of action. It crosses all political boundaries, because you'll find Republicans on board with this, Democrats on board, all kinds of people are on board with this. So it's not a thing that you can say it's left or right. But people have tried to position that way to gain a foothold. They try to suggest that if you don't like sustainable development, you don't like the environment, therefore you must be some heat-filled right-winger out there. But none of that is the truth, because this crosses political boundaries. It's a plan of action to protect the planet and create social equity by transferring personal wealth, placing private property under public control, and managing who lives where and how they get to live. That's sustainable development. If it doesn't have those components, it's not sustainable development. It's something you and I would like to fantasize as being sustainable development. And maybe that's the way it should be, but it's not this. It gets to your community through planner surveys, false claims, strategic misrepresentation. I'll tell you about that. That's actually a term that they're using over in Europe now. Strategic misrepresentation, regionalism, grants, federal regulations. So we're going to look at each one of those things, and I'm going to give you some brief examples. And then when we're done, I'm going to show you what you can do, how you can stand up and fight back with this stuff. Surveys. Let's take a look at a survey from the Capital Region Sustainability Plan in New York. This is one of the ways they sucker communities into taking the programs. Why do they have to be suckered? Because if you knew that all this was going to happen, that your property rights were at risk, that your long-term value of your property was at risk, that somebody could put a bicycle path 7 feet from your front door just because a council said they wanted to do it, there's nothing you can do, do you think anybody would want this stuff? No. So what they did is they came out with these surveys. You're like, no. So they came out with surveys. Here's a survey that says, wow, 76% of the people in New York, they got a picture of this. There's 1 million people in this region that New York wants to put together. 8 counties, 1 million people, and 76% of them support green infrastructure. Holy mackerel, I guess I better get on board because all my neighbors want this. Really? Of the 1 million people, take a wild stab at how many people filled out this survey. We got right where? 96 people voted in the survey. 96 out of them. That's really what I call a representative group. This gets worse. Let's take a look at Planned Bay Area, which is out in San Francisco. San Francisco has 9 counties in this Planned Bay Area. Another region. Planned Bay Area came up with a survey. And a survey said 87% believe that this plan is important. We need it. Wow, I mean, where do you get numbers like 87%? That's stunning. 87%. So the local activists got together, and they said, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. 87%? We question how you're doing this. What was your definition of your planned Bay Area? Well, there is. Planned Bay Area is something that will improve the economy. This is the definition in the survey, in case I didn't make that clear before they read it. So what the people who took the survey read was, it's something that will improve the economy, reduce driving, reduce greenhouse gases, and provide access to housing and transportation to anyone who needs it. How important is this? Well, the only miracle when you ask a question like that is that 100% didn't say yes. So the local activist said, that's not a legitimate question. You don't talk about any of the downsides. You don't talk about any of the risks. You just talk about Santa Claus. So the survey taker said, don't you worry, we're going to go back and we're going to redo this thing for you guys. Don't worry at all. So they went back and they redid it, and they came back 2 months later, and they got another survey. This time it's 84%. So they said, whoa, okay, wait a minute. I don't believe, I forgot to tell you. They had a visioning meeting before they did any of these surveys, and in the visioning meeting, 60% of the people didn't want the plan. So they then went to a survey. 87% did want the plan. But they reworded it, and now 84% want it. So the activists got up and said, well wait a minute, excuse me, how did you reword that now? So they reworded it, there. That's how the new wording is. Anybody see the difference?
Nope.
No, there is no difference. They never changed it. But they told them they were going to change it. And that's the key. There's a lot of deception that goes on here. If you had a package that was that good, would it be that hard to sell? I don't think so. So there's a lot of deception because the package is not that good. People then say, well, wait a minute, that's not fair. You asked the same question the same way, of course you got all these people that said yes. So the plan administrators came back and they said, the consortium came back and said, okay, here's what we did. They issued a summary. And in the summary, in the very last sentence, they said, a full evaluation of the plan's public engagement process will be conducted after the plan's adoption.
Yeah, there you go.
After.
Yeah, if you want to find out what's
Okay.
going on. So
Yeah.
Now this is hardball.
It's the same shit.
This is called steamrolling. These people are getting bowled over by the very people that are supposed to be protecting their interests. They're steamrolling to get what they want out of their own self-interest. False claims. Let's take a look at some phony claims that you will see in programs as they try to get into your area. They scare you to death. Hollywood, California has been revitalized. A group of businessmen got together. They're called stakeholders. Community stakeholders got together at a visioning meeting with public officials and planners. And they said, this city has been revitalized. We poured a lot of money into downtown. And the way things are going, we're going to have 60,000 more residents by the year 2030. We have to have some kind of housing to allow for that. We need high-density housing. We need to have transit-oriented development. Guys, we got to have this stuff. Pesky little activists came up, and they said, well, wait a minute. According to the 2010 census, the population isn't going up, it's going down. We're not going to have 60,000 more people. And besides, the residents are leaving those high-density areas because they don't like them. And they're also leaving the transit areas because they don't like living near the train. They don't want to hear that thing all night long. Well, the public officials said, oh, you're crazy, you don't know what you're talking about, you're just a bunch of right-wing activists. We need to get rid of you guys. They said the real people in the community understand that we have 60,000 people coming in, so somebody took that to court. Here's what happened. December 10th of 2013, the court said that the public officials falsified the data about 2010 population. They falsified it. The report that they issued falsified the data from the 2010 projections. Public officials concealed data in making their projections. In other words, the very people who were put in office to protect you were breaking the law so they could get what they wanted shoved through. That's called sustainable development. Now, it shouldn't be that way. If you have a good plan, you don't have to do this. Anybody here ever sold anything? You know when you have a good product. You know when you have a rotten product. Sometimes when you don't have the product that's so good, you have to play games. Or not represent the product, perhaps, which is what a public official should be considering. False claims. California passed an SB 375, which said the whole state has to engage in sustainable development. I tell you what's going on in California because guess what? It's heading east. It's heading east. And it's heading east far faster than you might think. And Andrew Cuomo certainly has no objection. One of the comments that came out in this book here, Communities Tackle Global Warming, they took this government book, this government report, Driving in the Built Environment, and they pulled this statement out of it. Residences in auto-oriented suburban areas produce greater greenhouse gas emissions than higher density areas. So the argument is, let's all live in high-dense dwellings because this way we'll have lower greenhouse gases. And there it is, black and white, and they took it right out of the government report. Right? You ready for the aha? Here's what they didn't tell them. It was also in that same report on the last page. The committee does not have the verifiable scientific evidence it would like to support our claim. Only modest reductions in short-term energy use can be expected, and we have not examined all of the related cost-benefit considerations. In other words, we never checked it, we don't understand the details, we need to look at it more, and it might not even pay off. Now, there's nothing wrong with going into something speculatively. That's fine, as long as you lay the cards on the table. Say, well, look, we think that greenhouse gases might be lower there, but we really need to do some more research before we can check. So do you guys want to join us in this endeavor, and let's check it out? But that's not what happened. This was shoved down the people's throats, and it was a lie. False claims. Anybody know Andrew Cuomo?
Oh, God.
Okay. All right. He put out a thing called Cleaner, Greener New York, which is it's actually a marketing campaign for a whole sustainable development initiative that he has called Capital Region Sustainability Plan. And if you open this book, you can see this right online. It starts out on the second or third page by saying, we need to clean up New York with greater ethics. So Mr. Cuomo, whoops, we'll go back here. Mr. Cuomo wants to clean up New York with greater ethics. He wants to have expanded disclosure so constituents know what's happening. This is good stuff. Green jobs are the centerpiece of New York's economic revitalization program. So he's going to put together a plan that's going to have massive numbers of green jobs. And we know we're going to get those green jobs, because green jobs increased 9.1% in the United States from 1998 to 2007. Okay, that's all true, and it all looks really good. Okay, let's look a little bit closer at that. You see, during that period, 1997 to 2008, New York did not gain any green jobs. They lost 1.9% in green jobs. They didn't gain 9.1. While other states made some, they actually lost them. Also, scandals prove that green jobs were very often nothing more than relabeled regular jobs. Are you aware the Salvation Army worker is now a green job? Okay, sanitation worker is now a green job. So these weren't new jobs, they just switched the title around. Okay, so is that full disclosure? Is that transparency that we're talking about? Is that this ethics?
No.
He used the insider group called the Apollo Group to assure New York's green jobs. You all familiar with the Apollo Group? If you look at this little, Cleaner, Greener New York, just you can Google Cleaner, Greener New York. If you look in there, it'll show you, oh yeah, we used, the Apollo Group told us we're going to get these green jobs. They told Barack Obama he was going to get shovel-ready jobs. And what did Barack say in December of 2009?
They weren't as shovel-ready as they thought.
Those jobs weren't so shovel-ready. Is that what we want to hear in New York? If you're ethical, are you telling me you're hiring the very guy that fell flat on his face? This is like going out and investigating 3 different groups to represent you and taking the worst of the 3. And yet he's supposed to be representing the people. So at very best, something is seriously wrong about Cleaner, Greener New York and the Capital Region Sustainability Plan. A thing called strategic misrepresentation. Bert Flyberg is from Denmark, and he works at the Aalborg University. And he spent years studying the different biases that exist in planning around the world. And he drew the conclusion that more often than not, the information that promoters and planners use to decide whether to invest in new projects is highly inaccurate, highly biased, and it makes the plans and the projects very risky. Don't you think that we as cities, community members, when somebody comes in and wants to plan a high-density city in our area, don't you think we're entitled to understand this piece of it? Instead of just the glossy brochures that you suddenly appear out of nowhere and you say, oh, this is going to be 87%, 87% of your neighbors want this today. We're entitled to know this information, and yet we don't know this information. It's either being kept from us intentionally, or it's being kept from us because these people are actually too negligent to check and find out what all the information is. Strategic. Planners routinely gloss over high costs, ongoing costs, and cost-benefit analysis. You will see a dearth of these. You will see these missing in almost every plan or master plan that's been reworked in a local community. That's called strategic misrepresentation. We don't necessarily out and out lie. We just overestimate, underestimate, forget to mention a few things. That's not exactly the way clean business is done anywhere. Officials and planners often claim that farmland is in short supply. We're going to have to attach a conservation easement so we can protect that farmland. Have we heard of farmland easements, conservation easements? Everybody familiar with how they work? Yeah, you give up a little piece of your land. Conservation easement isn't like an easement. A standard easement is, I give somebody the right to maybe get down to the stream by walking through my backyard. So I say, that's okay, you can use that. I'm going to give you an easement so you can walk through my yard. A conservation easement, you're surrendering ownership. It's not just a passive thing where you're letting somebody use your property, you're giving up your property. Here's what the officials don't tell you. Of all the available cropland in America, 60% is uncultivated. 60% of the cropland we have is uncultivated. Why do we need to be protecting more farms? We're not using the farmland that we have right now. And how many times when a conservation easement is issued do they just do it to create an open space? Conservation easements surrender property control, as we just mentioned a moment ago. And I talked about open space. Planners come into the community. Land use companies come into the community. Trust organizations. And they say, we need open space. Almost every community plan that's put together calls for more open space. We've got to have open space. We need urban developments because we're running out of open space. Here's what they don't tell you. According to the 2000 census, 94.6% of the United States is rural open space. Why do you need more? There's plenty of it out there now. Regionalism is another way these programs get into your community. It's surveys. It's false claims. It's regionalism. Regionalism is where you create an unelected board of bureaucrats. It becomes a governing board. It's a board of governance. Not government. Governance. There is no check and balance on governance. And governance is like mom telling her kids what to do. You don't get the talk back. It's a one-way street. Government is where you have a two-way street. There's checks and balances. You have representation and a vote and a say in the matter. With regionalism, you lose that say. Local public officials lose their authority under regionalism. And it's happening in virtually every state in America. Over here in New Jersey, they legislatively created the New Jersey Regional Highlands Council. 52 towns now, in order to protect the water, 52 towns have had their development rights restricted. And I forget what it is, a specific number, about 20-some of those towns can't do anything. They can't do any development at all without going to the Department of Environmental Protection for something like a simple addition on the house. They can't even go to the local zoning authority. They can't go to a local public official. They've lost their representation. They have to go to the DEP. And it can take up to a year to get authority. Now, I understand Governor Christie is going to loosen the strings on that a little bit. But even if he does, it doesn't matter. Because even if they loosen the strings and they allow public officials in these local communities to make more of their decisions, at any time they want, they can just reel it back in again. So your local official is now no longer just an autonomous body that we voted for and that we believe in. Now he's just a puppet and somebody else pulls the strings. One official in New Jersey said, the Highlands Act has turned us into a colony of northeastern New Jersey. Capital Region Sustainability Plan. These are the same people that formed the Capital Region Sustainability Plan. They're the same people that I talked about a few minutes ago when I had that survey that we did of 1 million people, only 96 showed up. 300 people participated in the formation of this regional plan. 300 out of 1 million. They had a series of meetings over several months, and for about 6 months, only about 150 showed up. So they dribbled in bits and pieces. At the end of the day, you had a total of 300 people involved in the process. Local public officials have no authority over the council decisions. They've already put in place 24 people on a consortium. And those 24 people have already surrendered their right to select what grants the organization will participate in and which ones they won't. You're going to see how important grants are in just a moment. They said, we'll let Albany take care of the grants for us. So that means the power that would be normally be invested in a local official, that you would then have some kind of check over, or at least have some kind of representation there, that's gone now. The consortium now decides what they're going to do, and they weren't even happy to make that decision. They handed it over to all of you and said, "Oh, you take care of it for us. We don't want to work that hard." So now those million people have what? One guy? Together, North Jersey Regional Plan rules 13 New Jersey counties under the jurisdiction of a single non-elected board. Local public officials, I'll repeat this again, have no authority over this board. The board speaks independently. Consortium members must agree to advance the HUD.EPA livability principles. When your public official, let's say they're chosen, let's say of the 13 counties here, maybe one of your public officials gets to sit on this board. You think he has any authority? He doesn't. Because when he signs the memorandum of understanding to join Together North Jersey, he signs an agreement in which he says, "I will advance the government's livability principles." Those are the ones I mentioned several slides back, those 6 principles that HUD, DOT, and EPA have: lower vehicle miles traveled, increased low-cost housing. They agree that they must advance those principles whether they want to or not. I think we called it centralized planning about 20 minutes or so ago. Regionalism is spreading across the country like wildfire. In Florida, Florida's 750 program combines 7 counties. Capital Region Sustainability Plan in New York combines 8 different counties. Thrive 2055 is in Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama, combines 16 counties in 3 states. Who makes the decisions? This isn't even statewide. Now you're talking mega regions. So all of a sudden, even the governor doesn't get the say, because you've got this mega region that crosses states' boundaries, and if they decide, well, we need a watershed over there, or they decide that this is a wetland and that's not a wetland, and we're going to put a nature preserve in here, who gets to say no? What power do the local people have to say once these boards are formed? And of course, Plan Bay Area, we talked about just a few moments ago, combines 8 different counties. By the way, this guy up here, Southeast Florida, if you don't already know it, it's not combined 7 counties anymore, it's combines 4, because 3 of them dropped out. It's people just like the people in this room got together and said, wait a minute, this is nothing but government centralized planning, and you're shoving it down our throats, and we're losing our property rights, and we're going to lose the ability to buy and sell our property the way we choose to, and they ended it. 3 are gone. That's now, I guess, the 4-county program they have down there now.
What are the New York
Grants.
counties?
Sorry?
The New York counties.
I'm not going to go through more now. I can get them for you. Good question. Grants are one of the key ways that these sustainable development programs come into your community. And again, for those who came in late, nobody has anything against sustainable development. Sustainability, developing things is a great idea. Protecting the planet for future generations, of course. Protecting our fresh water and our clean air, yeah, that's all important. This is the sustainable development model that we have a problem with. The one that was written by the UN years ago has wormed its way into every federal agency and is now found in our backyard. That's the guy we have a problem with. I'm going to give you an example now of what a grant can do in your community. This is HUD versus Westchester County. HUD accepted a grant several years ago, just a block grant for some housing. No big deal. A local community group sued the Westchester County, and they said, well, wait a minute, you falsified the form that you applied for the grant on. You have barriers to low-income housing. The guys in Westchester were scratching their head. We've got a great record on mixed housing. We didn't lie at all. What are you talking about? So they took it to a court, and they went through the plans for the community, and they said, well, you could interpret some things you're doing as being a barrier to low-income housing. So the court went after them, and they ordered them to build 750 low-income houses. This is because they accepted the grant. They also lost authority to a court-appointed monitor. So Westchester County said, wait a minute, this is crazy. We need some help. So they reached out to HUD. After all, HUD was the group that gave them the grant in the first place. They said, hey, we didn't cheat here. What's going on? Well, HUD came down on them like a ton of bricks. They expected they were going to have an ally, especially since a lot of the people in Westchester were Democrats. And at the time, you had President Obama. He's a Democrat. Democrats were in charge of HUD, so it seems like, it's all the same family, right? Well, this is a family that is torn asunder. HUD came down and said Westchester must go beyond the provisions in the court settlement that was only the beginning. 750 homes was not what they were going to have to build. It was going to be into the thousands. Low-income housing now needed to be near above-average schools. It wasn't good enough that they just built HUD homes, low-income housing homes. They had to take the best schools in the area and had to build them next to those because they wanted to be sure there were no barriers existing. And landlords cannot question the source of a renter's income, even though New York state law says you don't have to do that. And in Westchester County they say you don't have to do that. HUD demanded that Westchester County have no ability to check the source of income. So he could be a drug dealer, but he can rent your home, and there's nothing you can do about it. You have no ability to check into that. Ron Sims, at the time, was the Deputy Secretary of the EPA, and he said, we're going to pursue similar across the country because Westchester County has been so successful. They literally reduced Westchester County to servitude. They do what the federal government tells them to do. They do what the court-appointed monitor tells them to do. What happens to your representation when your public officials have to do what they're told by somebody else? In effect, it's been truncated, it's been sliced in half, if it's even existent anymore. Well, he said, we're going to do this in similar cities. In fact, we're going to start with 20 cities across the United States because we like what we were able to do with HUD up there in Westchester County. Well, let's take a look at federal regulations, another way that sustainable development gets into your community, because they built on that HUD model in the Federal Register with a program called Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing. This is a regulation that HUD put out, Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing. And in this, 1,200 cities across the country must adopt government benchmarks or face legal action. In other words, the government will establish what low-income housing is, what it looks like, where it has to be, and whether or not you comply with what the government wants. Central planning come in here anywhere, guys? Yeah. And now it's got the power of the law directly behind it. These federal regulations have the power, they're not law, but they have the power of law. These are going into effect in 1,200 cities across the United States right now. If you don't do it, you can go to jail. Just as what happened up in Westchester County, or face legal action. Government's in control. The Federal Register, September 24th, 2013. The Environmental Protection Agency had a notice of public hearing for a review of their water connectivity report. The water connectivity report is very simple. It says that we have power over navigable waterways. The problem with that power was nobody ever defined what a navigable waterway was. So they just keep defining down what a navigable waterway is, and all of a sudden they get a little stream in your backyard, and they can say, well, we have rights over that. Well, they're not happy with that. They now want to have control over all the bodies of water that connect the navigable waterways that nobody's been able to define clearly. In fact, it would look, well, let me go. The chair of the subcommittee on the environment said that if this was enacted, and it has been enacted, the EPA will have unprecedented control over private property across the entire United States. You see how we're being squeezed to this thing called sustainable development? This isn't about the environment. This is about control, and it's about transfer of wealth, but it has little or nothing to do with the environment. This, by the way, is a map of all the rivers and connecting rivers in the United States. That's what we're talking about. This is the kind of control that the EPA would have. There's virtually no place that they could not go if they chose to. Government control doesn't stop there. An executive order was written by President Obama in November. And here's what he said. We need to protect our country from climate change. We need to prepare for climate change. Oh, global warming is going to get you. So in order to do that, we need to plan, organize, train, and build, prevent, protect, and recover, manage property and livelihoods, and adjust natural and human systems. This is taken right out of the executive order. I mean, do you get the scope of what I just said? This is mammoth. The President of the United States is saying his federal agencies have the authority to manage property. They have authority to manage livelihoods and to adjust natural and human systems, all as a response to climate change.
1984.
Any excuse? Yeah. Now, if you think this is nothing but an executive order with no teeth, think again, because Organizing for Action, which is nothing but a group that supports Obama, actually was part of his campaign group originally. They're running a crash course in organizing to combat climate change out of their Miami office. They started this several months ago. The purpose of that is to implement exactly what it is that the President of the United States is talking about in that executive order. So as that thing unfolds, you're going to feel more and more crushing of the individual rights that we have on a local level. Prevent and protect, as is in that executive order, sound noble. They sound great. But where are the limits? There are none. There are no limits on that executive order. The president has the authority to do whatever he chooses to do because he decided he did. And he did it through regulatory action. Harvey Rubin was one of the members of that ICLA that we talked about a few minutes ago. And those are the people that were charged with the idea of rolling this out and making it real. And he said that in the implementation of sustainable development, individual rights will have to take a back seat to the collective. We don't even bother calling it the public. It's the collective. It's the collective. This guy's a player. He's a clerk of the court in Dade County, Florida. So if you have a legal problem in Florida and you want to protect your property, guess how far you're going to get? Not real far. Piece by piece, that map is becoming a reality in the country today. Whether it's out in the Klamath Dams, whether it's in upstate New York, whether it's out here on Long Island, the eastern end of Long Island, things that are going on right here in Nassau County, whether it's Florida, doesn't matter what state you're in, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, every single state, this is becoming a reality as these communities are moving more and more into this, into the high-density dwelling. So the answer to the question becomes, what can you do about it? Is there anything you can do? And I'm here to tell you there's a lot you can do. This does not have to be, but let me caution you. If you're going to depend on your congressmen and your senators, we love them. I know there's some really good senators and congressmen out there, but I wouldn't bet the
Not
house
in
on
New
them.
York.
I wouldn't have the farm. Okay? You've got to take matters into your own hands in a civil way. One thing you have to do is you've got to get allies. People need to understand what you just heard and understand that it's real and that it affects them. So I encourage you to get out and tell your friends and neighbors. Use the language that we used here, use some of the terminology that we had in here, check things out on the internet. Try to get other people to come down here. Don't always look to be preaching to the choir, because most of the people here, I'm assuming, are conservative, and that's fine. If you're not conservative, that's equally fine. This is not a conservative issue. This is an issue of anybody who owns property or anybody who hopes to own property. Anybody who has a bank account today and hopes to be able to pass that on to their children tomorrow. That's who this affects. Virtually everyone. Anyone who has a dream and wants to think that America once again can be the greatest nation on earth. That's who is affected by this. So we need to notify those people and pull them in. I put down 10 steps here that I'll go over with you. These are things that you can do. One is get to know your local official. Whoever your local official is, find them and try to find the ones that at least have an open mind to understand what's going on. Talk to them, listen to them, get to know them. Another one is talk with your neighbors and friends and attend public meetings together. Now, I'm going to talk about a little something that I did. I did this because I believe in it passionately. I started a workshop. In my Plan A, my business, corporate measures, I do workshop and training and turnarounds for companies and all that kind of stuff. I took that skill and I applied it to a thing called How to Become a Civil Warrior. This is a workshop that I run, and if you're interested in one, let me know. What it does is it teaches people how to talk to their neighbors, how to talk to their friends. It teaches you how to stand up to bullies. It teaches you how when you're under pressure and you got like 2 minutes to talk in front of a public meeting and you got to get it out and you got to hit the points, it tells you exactly what to say. It tells you how to shut down a bully who's coming after you with lies and distortions, how to shut him down, make him look bad, walk away, but most importantly, not that you really cared about the bully, because we don't. What we care about is the impression of the other person standing by watching us, the person who is misinformed and uninformed. We're in this mess that we are today because so many people have no idea what I'm talking about. They never saw this. They never heard of this form of sustainable development. They just know what their kids bring home in school books and tell them, Mom, you got to give me money because we got to give it to this cause or that cause, this liberal cause or that one. This program helps you pull your neighbors in, get them involved in what's going on, and then have them come down to meetings and have them come down to the town hall with you. My goal with this is to take all the groups that we have and double our size within 60 days of having one of these meetings, and then double it again after that. If we can do that, we can literally get thousands and thousands of people that public officials will listen to. The only thing that I know that for sure a public official will listen to is the fact that they might not have a seat next election day or the day after. I don't know of any other thing that will get them to move. This is designed to get them to move, called a chosen name, a civil warrior. Let's be civil warriors. So talk with your neighbors and attend meetings together. Analyze surveys, crisis claims, and assumptions. You're going to be pummeled when you go to these town hall meetings and these planning meetings. You're going to be pummeled with surveys and literature and data and information. Question it. The same way we were talking when we were in school to question things. Question this stuff. What do you mean greenhouse gases are lower in high-density areas? That doesn't make an awful lot of sense. You're telling me there's less greenhouse gases over Manhattan than there are in Iowa? That doesn't really add up. So how can you validate that for me? Check everything. Believe nothing. Especially be suspicious of a survey that the planner did themselves. That's the last survey. That's like a guy selling Hondas. I think a Honda's a great car, by the way. It's a guy selling Hondas, so why don't you ask me what I think about Hondas? So you want to go out and get an outside firm to do this. On my website, I designed a thing called the Planner's Resolution. And people have been using this very effectively. Go to the website, it's not up here, sustainablefreedomlab.org, sustainablefreedomlab.org. On the website, on the lower right, down to the bottom, you'll see a box you can click. And that'll take you to the Planner's Resolution. And what this is, it's a resolution that we ask the planner to sign on. It says, if you come into our community, you guarantee to leave our property the way it was. Or if you're going to do something that's going to infringe upon my property rights, I get to opt out of that. Anything wrong with that? I mean, if a plumber came into my house to fix a leak, and he damaged my heater, or he banged a hole in the side of the bathtub or something, wouldn't he have to pay for that? Well, then why is it that a planner can come in and virtually uproot the entire community without any liability? That's absurd. We want to know that if I don't like the plan and it's going to infringe on my property rights, you're going to put a bicycle path 7 feet from my front doorstep? Hey, I want out of this thing, and I want a way to get out of it. So you're going to sign off on that, and you can have the public officials sign off on that too. Watch what happens when you bring that up at the next planning meeting. That'll get some heads going. Read and understand all stipulations in grants and conservation easements. These are not straightforward deals. They have all kinds of little hidden clauses in there, and almost every grant has a string attached to it. I was just talking to a gentleman the other day, came from New Jersey. A friend of his had a business, and they invented this new concept, taking an MIT grant to understand. So he invented this new concept. Pennsylvania said, oh, we want you to come over here with that new idea. So they said, okay, well, I'll bring my company over here, and we're going to, if you come over here, we'll give you a grant of $150,000 just to bring your company over to our state. Okay, that sounds good. But then somebody looked at the string. The string was you had to hire 25 high-tech employees within the first year. Whoa, for a startup company? How are you going to hire 25 high-tech employees? And if you don't hire 25 high-tech employees in the first year, that patent that you just had, the state of Pennsylvania now has it. We now own it. Well, that's a sweet deal. So hopefully he didn't take the $150,000. These grants have strings. Federal grants are notorious for strings. And when you see livability principles as a function of getting a check for $10,000 or $50,000, just say goodbye. Just say no to the $10,000 or $50,000. Watch the grants. Best thing is just say no to grant money. Yeah, when in doubt, say no. Avoid grant money. Do not agree to the formation of regions, because while they sound all cushy and fuzzy and warm and nice on the outside and all the wonderful things they're going to do for your community, what they do is they take away your voice. You lose your public official, you lose your local authority, and you lose your representation. The United States was based on the principle that all the power belonged to who? The government or the people?
People.
The people. What's happened? What's happened? The President of the United States can pass an executive order and tell the IRS that now he gets to go after conservative groups? He passed an executive order that says he can basically take 501c4s and define what campaign activity is. The president gets to define what that is. What happened to the people? What happened to the FEC? We need to turn that back around the way it's supposed to be, again. So do not agree with the formation of a region, because what you're doing is you're taking another group, almost like federal agencies, and you're imposing it upon yourself. And you know what happens with federal agencies. We can't overturn these regulations. We try, we talk about it, but in practical terms, it's very difficult. With 2/3 majority, 2/3 on both houses, because you have to be able to override the presidential veto. What's the likelihood of that? Say no to regions. If your public official starts to talk about a region, get together and say, listen, do you understand you're probably going to lose your, you lose your authority? And then when you lose your authority, it's not just you, it's me. I lose my representation. So this is a lose-lose for both of us. And at the end of the day, when decisions are made, we won't have we won't be at the table. If there's a clock in the deal, slow down. If somebody's trying to push you to get this thing done now, get it done yesterday, just say, well, wait a minute, we need to study this. You're talking about my property. You're talking about the future value of my land, not now, but 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. And then I'll leave to my children and their children. No, I'm not going to rush through this thing. Slow down. Climate change isn't going to destroy us all within the next 6 months or 12 months. Be wary of plans based on climate change and CO2 reduction. Most of these plans say, oh, there's a population increase coming along, or climate change is going to destroy the planet right now. We've got to respond to climate change, or we have to take care of CO2 pollution is going to ruin our environment, so we have to reduce the number of vehicle miles traveled. So we have to install smart meters in your community so that we can control the amount of electricity and energy that's being used. This is all silly. It's based on projections, it's based on predictions, it's based on bad science. And there's plenty of competition out there that says, no, this isn't true. Opposition. Develop your own plans to protect the earth and property rights. Look at your own plan. Create your own plans. I've worked with people in Pennsylvania who've actually sat down and put together plans taken right through the year 2030, and nobody lost any property, nobody lost any rights, nobody gave anything up, and they didn't take any grants. So, in this case, they took a grant, but it was one there were no strings. A grant to do a study, that was it. And they kept the study locally. So there's ways that you can do planning. Now, I don't know if anybody here has been to my website, but I think Bob, you said I should mention this. So I'm going to mention this. People say, well, how can you consolidate all this stuff? I can't remember everything you said. Well, a few months ago, I put this together. It took me about 3 months to do this. There's 8 presentations on here. They're 4 to 5 minute presentations. They talk about just what I did, but it's a little slide presentations that are concise and they're fast and they're bang. You can sit with a neighbor, you can pop it on your television set and watch it, you can put it on your laptop and show it to a public official over lunch. They're short enough that even if they say you've got 5 minutes to talk, you can even do it right there if you can get a picture up there so people can look at it. So I've tried to present down and dirty fast. Now this thing sells, this is like $20 plus you got to ship it and all this stuff. If you would like to have these, I mean, that's purely up to you. If you think this would be good in your bag of tricks, they're there, just $10. You can have them for $10. So just grab whatever you want, share them with people, get them out there and get them in front of people. What I'm about, what John Anthony is about within this movement, is trying to provide you with tools that make a difference. We can't make a difference just talking to ourselves. This is a lovely meeting, and I'm so glad all these people, you've all come here tonight. I'm humbled that all you have showed up here tonight. But the fact is we need to get double, triple, quadruple the number that we have in this right now, and they can't all necessarily think the same way we do on everything. Some people are going to think right wing, left, well, no, hard left wing is a hard one to get along with sometimes, because they don't think the way we think. There's a whole different agenda there. But certainly people in the center, certainly people in the center right, certainly people in the center left, they're all community members that are going to be hurt. So what I want to do through my website and through my work and these DVDs and the workshop is to give you tools that you're better equipped to answer that. In conclusion, communities are in peril because the sustainable development movement seeks to convince us that if we don't compromise our rights and limit our choices, future generations will suffer. Yet this is a false choice. As communities, we can pull together and create our own plans to improve our lives and the environment. We don't need the control of national and regional groups, and we don't need the seductive lure of grant money. Working locally and working together, that's the real choice. How because that I tossed. I want to ask you your opinion of this. I got this little guy off the internet, and I call him a civil warrior. And I made that part of my workshop here, a civil warrior, because I wanted to create something that was a warrior, but he was, he wasn't threatening, but he was. So I tried to create that cute little guy that was a warrior, because that's the way I envision us as going forward. Good people, honest people, hardworking people, but persistent people who don't quit until we get the things that we're after. So after I'd like to talk and give me your thoughts about what you think about my civil warrior and this idea. Now, I don't know if we have a couple of minutes here. 29. I'll be happy to take a few questions if I can be listening. Thank you.
2030 seems to be a key year. You're hearing it all over the place.
It's 2030, it's 2050, it's 27, it's whatever. That's just the buzz one around here right now. But yeah, but it's absurd if you think about it. 2030 is what, 27 years into the future? No, 17 years in the future. We've got plans that are 50 years into the future. I mean, how in the world can you plan a community in a region 50 years into the future? One of the problems with sustainable development, one of the problems with these 30, 40, 50-year plans is they don't allow for technology. Conservation easement says we're using up all of our property, we're using our land, so we have to protect it so we'll have it for future generations. Well, there's new methods of farming that are coming out all the time. There's new species of animals that are coming out. You know, we have the arrogance to think that, you know, we can protect this species of plant for the next species of animal for the next 50 years, when meanwhile we're killing 2 other species that we don't even know about to try to protect the one that we think we know everything about. So there's arrogance in there. No. We should be planning for 2030 or 2050. Yes.
Dovetailing your UN 21, I'm an educator and I was in a classroom just this past week where there was a 5th grade class talking or teaching on the Common Core. They were using a module, and the module was identified as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Oh, okay.
And it comes from the UN.
All right.
And I looked at this thing, I was truly blown away.
Huh?
And I read through it, and it has all these wonderful sounding platitudes. And really, my question to the teacher afterwards was, isn't all this really in our Bill of Rights? Isn't this in our Constitution? Isn't this in our Declaration of Independence? Well, why are we going to the UN for these issues? And Article 25 says, everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care, necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control.
To each according to his needs.
So what happens when the next guy takes it over and he says, I don't have those rights?
None of those are right. None of those are right.
I think it's inalienable. Yeah, and that you're absolutely right. The UN Human Rights Declaration is thank you for bringing that up, because that's so pivotal to the whole argument, because we have that. Nobody gave it to us. That's like somebody saying, yes, you can go to the bathroom. Oh, does that mean I can't go if you don't say yes? Then what happens? We automatically have the right to go to the bathroom, to get as rich as we want, to stay as poor as we choose, to make our own decisions in life and be successful or not. But to have somebody, dictate that as a right automatically means they impose themselves in my life as the arbiter of the limits of those rights. And that's something that's intolerable in a free society. Yes, sir?
I'm just curious, the example that you cited earlier where the public officials had actually falsified the data,
Yeah.
and they found out that, well, they prosecuted. Anybody know if they were
No, they
prosecuted?
didn't prosecute them. What they did is they went back and the whole plan was put on hold. So the court said, okay, you can't move forward with the plan, and that's it. It was just stopped. Now, it was the town that did this, but it's the town and regional planners that did this. But they do have to come back with new information to present to the voters. So hopefully that will be honest information. But no, and isn't that a wonder? Nobody's in jail. Gee. What would happen if you or I did that?
That's exactly right.
Ray and I were
Yeah.
talking about selling products before. What if I sold a product in that fashion? Would I not be in deep trouble? Christopher?
It sounds like we had an election recently where they put the question of legalized gambling on it. And the way it was put, it sounded like a great thing. You know, they just made it was going to increase all these false things, going to make people wealthier, it's going to create jobs and all that.
Sure, everything does.
That's how they put it. Cuomo was responsible for that, putting it on the ballot as such, and of course it passed.
The problem, I saw your hand, Ray, I'll get right there. The problem is that officials have gotten to the point now where they blatantly lie. They've done it so much and so often. I don't know how many saw this little video I did. It's on my website. It's about the Affordable Care Act. I don't know how many of you know this. We know that the president said 42 or 43 times, if you like your health plan, you can keep your health plan. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Ad nauseum, he did this. Here's what you might not know. The original health care plan, as it was written, did have a grandfather clause. It was fairly loose in there. And people would have lost their plans, yes. But most of them would have been able to hang on to those plans. It was President Obama who went to Health and Human Services and the Treasury and said, I want this to be rewritten so we tighten up the definition of grandfather. Now, this was done on June 17th of 2010. March 23rd, he signed a law that basically did at least make an attempt to protect your policy. June 17th,
Change the law.
this is the guy that changed the law that made it so you're going to lose your insurance. And he had the gall on September, 60 days later, to go out in front of the country and say, oh, if you like your health plan, you can keep your health plan. Now, it gets even worse than that, because on, I think it was September 10th, SB 20, Joint Resolution 23, SJ 23, in the Senate, was a resolution that said, we're going to rescind that regulation. We're going to rescind the regulation that confines grandfathering so tightly that everybody's going to lose their policies. In fact, they're going to lose the 93 million policies. I don't know if you've ever taken a look at the Federal Register. In the Federal Register, under that regulation that was passed on June 17th of 2010, up to 93 million Americans, that's a third of the whole darn country, are going to lose their insurance policies. The Senate put up a resolution to vote to stop that. Every single Democrat voted against it on the basis that it would wipe away clarity. Now we have clarity. What clarity? The president's still running around the country on the television telling everybody still keep a plan that he's responsible that you're going to lose. So the message here is, who does that? What kind of a human being, how low, on the social scale do you have to go before you would not only lie to people, you'd be the guy responsible for the lie?
He's delusional.
That's
Because they can do
what's
it.
happened. Yes, to address what you
Yeah.
said.
They've been
Yeah,
doing
that's
it,
what- and they don't
and
get-
they keep
they don't get
doing it
punished,
war
and
on
they-
war. Nothing happens.
And it has worked its way into virtually every aspect of government and
Yeah.
at every single level. I don't know if you noticed it, these guys are lying. These are lies. Either they're the dumbest people on earth, or they're just lying one after the other. So what has to happen is, it's our fault that this is happening. We don't pay attention to what people are doing. So we've allowed government just to run unfettered. We send our checks off to Washington, D.C. or Albany or wherever it may be. We send our money off, and we really don't pay attention to what's happening. And so they realize we can get away with this. They got the press covering for them, so nobody's going to really point out any of this stuff. So they've become very, very bold. And as they've gotten bold, even marginal people who probably are good people that wouldn't really not tell the truth, all of a sudden they're deciding, well, yeah, what the heck, I can get away with it. Let me just tell this little white lie. So that's why we have to mistrust all of them until we can change the model. Right.
All I was going to say is that gentleman before was talking about these rights.
Yeah.
And I've been arguing that for years and years and years. Rights are something you are born with.
Yes.
Rights are not something that anybody else provides. The minute somebody else has to provide something that is your right, you have just been given the right to make them your slave.
Correct.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, right.
Master.
Make you their slave. Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly right. Our rights come not from man. Our rights come from nature or God or wherever your feelings lie, your beliefs lie. But our rights do not come from man. They are inalienable rights. They cannot be taken away. And if somebody wanted to take my rights away, they'd start out by telling me what my rights are.
If I have a right to health care,
Right.
then I have a right to enslave a doctor.
Right. That's right. Any other thoughts or questions? Yes, ma'am.
I go to the New York debate clubs, and we do different topics. And a lot of the people in the clubs in Manhattan, they're a lot younger than I am and a lot others. And you would be absolutely amazed on the subjects that they are clueless about, which is A, what is really going to happen in their future. Do they really think they're going to have the ability, like I did, to make some good real estate investments and come out with some money? They go along with all of this sustainability, that's keywords. I feel sorry for them because they don't understand where their future is going in terms of their individual wealth, power, and control. What I try to do in these debate clubs, and you come across opposition, but you've got to break through to these people that they have and deserve individual rights and wealth. because this Agenda 21, it's secondary agendas. If they're going to build a 120 square foot house in Manhattan, it should cost $300 a month and not $800. So they don't, they say, well, look at the corporations, blame the corporations. 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, where are all these young people going to be? That's why the civil warrior thing is good, but these young people have to be educated and not like through Common Core. They need to be re-individualized. That's
that's
what
what-
I'm going to say.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I put, can I borrow the orange card from you, please, Glenn? Yeah. For those who wanted to know about the Agenda 21, as I said, I wouldn't make a big deal about it. It's for your understanding. This little card outlines all of them. They're for free over there. Try just take one or two. I'm not sure how many we have. But Emily has them on the table over there in the front. Pick one up before you leave. This way you can look at it, you can learn a little about it. But as I said, this is really for your own knowledge. Thank you very much. That's really for your own knowledge so that you can understand more about it. But it's not for proselytizing or trying to convince everybody it's Agenda 21. But it's important that you as leaders in the community understand what the history of this is and what exactly it is that you're facing. But it's really about getting more people engaged. It's about getting more people involved. Talk about personal stories, people that you know who've lost property rights. We have a friend of ours in Morristown, New Jersey, who had a drip line ordinance that they passed over. The tree drip line ordinance was passed. People had nothing to say about it, but all of a sudden, if you have the drip line of the tree, wherever that is, you can't do anything underneath the tree. That means you can't put a sandbox back there, you can't have a swing for your kids in the backyard. And so this guy's got a friend of mine has a yard full of pines and different types of trees and things back there. Well, 40% of his yard now is unusable. Well, what does that mean if he wants to sell his house to some family who has kids? Well, we can't do anything with that part of the yard.
Cut down the trees.
Yeah, cut down the trees.
Cut down, well, you can't. To cut down the tree, it's insane. It's like 14 pages of regulations of what you have to do if you really want to be able to cut down the tree. We have another friend who lives in northwestern New Jersey, and he has a little stream running in his backyard. He's got 4 acres, 5 acres, 4 acres. He's got about 4 acres of land. EPA came in and said that was a navigable waterway. They just reassigned it as certified it as a navigable waterway. And now he's not allowed to go within 300 foot of it. He has to have a buffer, 300 feet of either side of it. Well, what does that do to your property when you got a 300-foot buffer going right down the side of the thing? So all of a sudden you don't have 4 acres of land anymore. You have whatever 4 acres minus 300 feet coming all the way down is. So all of these are incursions and infringements on our rights, the rights that were given to us by the virtue of the fact that I just bought a piece of property. I should own that, right? Well, now you tell me I can't own it. This would be like if I went out and I bought a laptop and I saved and I got my money together and I finally got the $500 or $600 to get myself a laptop and I'm all excited about my new laptop, and then somebody says, well, you can't use it on Sundays, you can't use it on Thursdays, and you can put these programs in, but you can't put those programs in. And by the way, you can only use the battery on Wednesdays. Well, who owns the laptop? But that's what's happening to our property. One by one, our rights are being infringed on, and you said it, they don't see it. People don't see that this is happening. People think that socialism is okay. I just heard somebody say that today. Oh, socialism, well, that's all right.
It's the dumbing down.
Yeah.
So you
Public
need to
education
be
is
the voices
successful,
in the
yeah.
community. Being here in this meeting is good, but even more important is what happens when you leave this meeting. Who do you talk to? What do you say? What do you talk to with your friends? We have neighbors, and one is pretty far to the left. The other, not so sure. But you know what? We had a wonderful breakfast Sunday. We all went out. We had a really good time. We chatted, and I got to tell you, the guy who leans a little to the left, he wants nothing to do with the government. He understands how the government is the gorilla in the room, and you got to stay away from him. And the next time I meet him, we haven't talked about this yet. Next time I'll suddenly I plant a seed and then move on. Plant a seed and then move on. But the next time we get together, I'm going to suggest, well, maybe when you vote, you ought to vote for the guy that promises to shrink that government, regardless of what else he stands for. Because sometimes you have to put the big stuff first. Forget the little stuff. So, unless there's any other questions, yes, sir.
I know you-
With that, and then I'll get to you, sir.
I know you
Yes.
said not to think about the politicians, but are there any politicians on the national level that are taking lead on this and are fighting against Agenda 21?
Well, you've got you've got, well, Tom Coburn had done a series of town hall meetings or phone meetings or teleconferences about sustainable development, so I know that's something that he's interested in. Who's the other senator out there in Oklahoma? Big senator in Oklahoma.
In-
Thank
Inhofe,
you, yeah,
yeah.
Senator Inhofe. He's big on that. And of course, you've got Ted Cruz, and you've got some of these good conservatives in there that stand up, Mike Lee. These people understand what's going on, and we've got to support them. You may not agree with everything they do, and I understand that, but you got to go for the big stuff. And right now, if you're in a field and you just got shot and you're bleeding, don't worry about killing the enemy. You got to stop the bleeding. And right now we're bleeding profusely, so we've got to stop that. Even if a guy doesn't believe 100% what you believe, if he believes the big stuff, then you got to get behind that person and support them. I can't tell you the number of people, and I'm probably getting in trouble with this one. In the last election, they said, well, I'm not going to vote for Romney because they're all the same. Come on, one's a capitalist, the other's a communist. How hard is this? They're not the same. I mean, Romney may not be everything that we wanted, but I'm talking good conservatives, took that stance and sat home. Do you know we lost the 2012 election not because Obama had so many votes, but because we had so little?
5 million
We had
Republicans.
over
They
4
don't.
million votes less than we had the last time.
Shame on all of them.
And the message that we sent to Washington, D.C. Republicans was the only way you can win is to be more to the left. Because McCain got more votes than Romney, so we need more guys like McCain out there. I mean, let's not bite off our nose to spite our faces. Let's not shoot ourselves in the foot as we move forward. Yes, sir.
Are you aware of the friendly lawsuits being waged by Sierra Club and stuff like that, where
About the environment, where they flood the system?
and they do this with the EPA, and
It's a backdoor deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's being investigated, I think, right?
It is being investigated, but all these federal, they flood the EPA with lawsuits, and then the EPA can't go for no lawsuits.
And then they charge the taxpayer for it.
And then, they charge the taxpayer to defend the thing, and then meanwhile, since the EPA can't respond to all lawsuits, they get what they want anyway, by default.
Yeah.
So this is going on in the western part of the United States. There is an attack on our property. And it's going to look like this.
Yeah.
It's more and more, it's looking like this. 30% of the land and growing belongs to the federal government, 10% belongs to the state, that's 40%, and heaven knows how much belongs to land trusts, that they keep buying up conservation easements by telling everybody you're going to get a tax break, it's the best deal in town. We've got to educate our neighbors, our friends, our families, the people we care about, love, barely know. We've got to get them active and get them down to town hall meetings. So if you're going to join my group, want to sign up, or just let me know, or don't let me know, let Bob know. If you're interested in one of those workshops, we'll get something going out here for you, so we can do that on one Saturday. If you want the DVD, it's discounted, so you can, so it won't hit you too hard. I just want you to get out there and be successful. We can win this. But you can't depend on Washington, D.C. to do it any longer. We've got to depend on us and our neighbors and friends to do it. So right now, what we need is massive numbers of people beyond anything we've ever dreamed of before. So it's a good place to start. Thank you.